A day in the life of a medieval fisherman. Chapter 1. Before the shore wakes. The fisherman begins to wake while the world is still very quiet, and the air inside his small wooden room feels cool and still. And for a moment he does not move at all. He only breathes slowly and listens to the soft silence around him. And that silence is not empty. It is filled with very small sounds. The faint creak of old wood, the light touch of air near the edges of the wall, and far away, almost too far to notice, the quiet and steady presence of the sea. And he lies there for a little longer, not because he is tired, but because there is no need to hurry, and the morning itself has not yet begun to hurry either. It is still resting in a soft and gentle darkness. After some time, he opens his eyes slowly, and the room around him appears in soft shapes. The outline of the wall, the low table, the place where his clothes rest, and everything looks the same as it did the night before. And that sameness feels calm and familiar, like something that does not need to change. And he sits up slowly, placing his feet onto the wooden floor, and the floor feels cool and slightly rough beneath his skin. And he stays there for a moment, feeling that coolness, breathing slowly, letting himself wake in a quiet and steady way. He reaches for his clothes, simple and worn, and he begins to dress, one movement at a time, very slowly, lifting the cloth, placing his arm through a sleeve, pulling the fabric across his shoulders, tying what needs to be tied. And each action feels familiar, something his hands have done many times before. And there is no thought needed, only a calm repetition of small movements. And once he is dressed, he stands, stretching just a little, and he moves toward the door, and when he opens it, the early air enters softly, cool and slightly damp, carrying a faint smell of salt and earth. Outside, the world is still very quiet. The path is empty. The houses are dark, and the sky is a deep, soft blue, and the sea beyond the village is only a dim shape beneath a thin layer of mist. And he stands there for a moment, breathing in the cool air, letting it fill his lungs slowly. And then he steps forward, beginning his walk toward the shore. The path beneath his feet is familiar, slightly uneven, with patches of damp earth and small stones. And he walks slowly, not because he is tired, but because there is no reason to move quickly. And the morning itself is still moving slowly. And as he walks, he hears small sounds, a distant bird, the faint movement of wind, and nothing feels sharp or sudden. Everything remains soft and gentle, and the air continues to touch his face and hands in a cool and steady way. As he moves closer to the shore, the smell of the sea becomes stronger, and the mist lies low over the ground and water, softening the shapes around him, and his boat appears slowly through that mist, resting where it always rests, pulled up on the sand, quiet and still. And he approaches it calmly, placing a hand on the side of the boat, feeling the wood beneath his fingers, slightly damp from the night air, slightly rough in places, and he stands there for a moment, not doing anything, just feeling the quiet of the morning and the presence of the boat. Then he begins to prepare, checking the rope, lifting it slightly, letting it fall back into place, making sure it is not tangled, and he reaches for the net, lifting it slowly, feeling the fibers, slightly stiff, slightly damp, and he looks at it carefully, though there is nothing unusual to see. Everything is as it should be, and he sets it down again, arranging it neatly, and these actions are slow and repetitive, one after another, and they feel calm, like part of the same quiet rhythm that has begun with his waking. The light begins to change very slowly, becoming just a little brighter, though still soft and pale, and the water near the shore moves gently, small waves touching the sand with a quiet and steady sound, and he steps into the shallow water, feeling the coolness around his feet, and he begins to push the boat forward, slowly, feeling the resistance of the sand beneath it, and then the lightness as it begins to float, and he continues to guide it into the water until it moves freely, and then he steps in carefully, steady and balanced, placing his feet in their familiar positions. He takes the oar and holds it for a moment, feeling the smoothness of the wood, worn by many uses, and then he begins to row, slowly, gently, each movement quiet and controlled, the oar entering the water without a splash, and the boat begins to move away from the shore, and the sound of land becomes softer behind him, replaced by the gentle rhythm of water against wood. The mist still hangs over the sea, and the sky is slowly growing lighter, though still calm and muted. And he continues to row at the same steady pace, not fast, not slow, just even. And the boat glides across the water, leaving only a faint line behind it that disappears quickly. And as he moves farther from the shore, everything feels more quiet, more open, and more still. And he continues in that stillness, rowing, breathing, and letting the morning unfold around him in its own slow and gentle way. Chapter 2. The quiet work on water. Hey! The fisherman lets the boat slow until it drifts almost without movement, and the water beneath him feels steady and soft, rising and falling in a slow and gentle rhythm that repeats again and again. And he rests the oar across the side of the boat, placing it carefully where it will not slip. And for a moment, he does nothing at all, only sits and breathes, and looks out over the water that stretches quietly in every direction, covered in a thin layer of mist that softens the edges of everything, making the distance feel close and far at the same time. The air is cool, but not cold now, and it moves slowly across his face, carrying a faint smell of salt and damp wood. And he lifts the line with one hand, feeling its weight, and begins to prepare it again, checking that it is not twisted, letting it run gently through his fingers. And the rope feels slightly rough and slightly wet, and he lowers it into the water in a slow and careful motion, not letting it fall too quickly. And once it is set, he rests his hand lightly on the edge of the boat and begins to wait. The waiting stretches out in a quiet and steady way, and nothing changes suddenly. Nothing interrupts the calm, and the surface of the water shows only small movements, soft ripples that come and go without sound. And the boat moves just a little beneath him, rocking in a slow and even pattern, and he follows that movement without thinking, his body adjusting gently, and his breathing remains slow and steady. After some time, he begins to pull the line back in, very slowly, hand over hand, feeling the rope slide across his fingers, cool and smooth in places, rough in others, and he lifts it carefully, watching the water as it breaks around the line. And sometimes there's nothing, and sometimes there are a few small fish. And if there are fish, he lifts them into the boat without hurry, placing them gently on the wooden floor, and their movement is quiet and brief. And then stillness returns, and he prepares the line again, lowering it once more into the water. This pattern repeats again and again, lowering, waiting, lifting, and each time it feels the same, and that sameness becomes a kind of calm, a soft rhythm that continues without change. And he does not think about how long he has been there, because time feels different on the water. It moves slowly, almost unnoticed, carried by the gentle motion of the boat and the quiet repetition of his work. After a while, he reaches for the net, lifting part of it from the side of the boat, and he checks it slowly, running his fingers along the fibers, feeling for any small tangles or places where the threads have tightened. And he lowers it into the water, spreading it gently, and the net sinks slowly beneath the surface, its shape soft and loose, and he lets it rest there. And again, he waits. The mist around him drifts in slow patterns, sometimes thinning, sometimes gathering again, and the light above becomes softer and more even, not bright, not sharp, just a calm and steady glow that rests on the water, and the sounds remain quiet. The faint movement of waves, the soft creak of wood, and sometimes a distant bird that passes overhead, and then the sound fades again, leaving only the steady quiet of the sea. He sits for a long time, not moving much, only shifting his hands from time to time, adjusting his position slightly, and then, after some time, he begins to lift the net slowly, carefully, drawing it back into the boat, and the fibers slide through his fingers, wet and cool. And if there are fish caught within it, he frees them gently, one by one, placing them beside the others. And if there are none, he simply gathers the net and sets it down again, and prepares to repeat the same process. The repetition continues, and the day moves forward in a very quiet and predictable way. And he rows a little now, just a few slow strokes, moving the boat to a slightly different place. And the oar enters the water with a soft sound, and the boat glides forward, then slows again. And he rests and begins once more, lowering the line, waiting, lifting, and the rhythm does not change. Medieval fishermen often worked in this slow and steady way, using simple tools and relying on patience. And this fisherman follows that same pattern, and his hands move without hurry. His eyes remain calm, and his body stays balanced with a gentle movement of the boat. At some point, he reaches for a small piece of bread, wrapped in cloth, and he eats slowly, taking small bites, chewing quietly. And as he eats, he looks out over the water, which remains calm and unchanged. And when he is finished, he folds the cloth again and places it beside him, and returns to his work without pause, lowering the line again, and waiting again. The hours pass in the same way, and the light shifts slowly, becoming a little softer, and the air begins to cool slightly, though it remains gentle, and the water continues to move in the same slow pattern. And the boat rocks quietly, and the fisherman continues his work, repeating the same small actions over and over, without change, without surprise. And the calm of the sea, the softness of the light, and the steady rhythm of his movements blend together into one continuous and soothing flow. And he remains within that flow, moving slowly, breathing quietly, and letting the day pass in its own gentle way. Chapter 3: The Slow Return to Evening. After a long stretch of quiet waiting and gentle work upon the water, the fisherman begins to notice that the light has changed in a soft and gradual way. Not suddenly, not sharply, but in a slow fading that feels almost the same as the passing of time itself. And the sky above, which had been pale and even, now carries a softer tone, slightly dimmer, slightly cooler. And the water reflects this change in a quiet and muted way, becoming smoother in appearance, as if the whole surface has settled into a deeper calm. And the fisherman, without thinking too much about it, begins to gather his line more carefully, lifting it from the water in slow and steady motions, feeling the familiar texture of the rope against his fingers, cool and damp. And he coils it neatly beside him, placing it in the same place it always rests. And then he reaches for the net, drawing it in with the same patience, letting the wet fibers slide gently through his hands. And if there are fish caught within it, he frees them one by one, slowly, without hurry, placing them beside the others. And if there are no fish, he simply folds the net and sets it down. And there is no disappointment in that, no sense of loss, only the continuation of the same quiet routine that has shaped the entire day. He pauses for a moment, sitting still in the boat, and the water moves beneath him in its steady rhythm, lifting and lowering the boat in small, gentle motions. And he looks out toward the shore, which now appears more clearly through the thinning mist. The faint shapes of the village returning into view, and the air carries a slightly cooler touch, a hint of evening beginning to settle into the day. And with that quiet awareness, he reaches for the oar and begins to row back toward the land. Each stroke is slow and even, just as it was in the morning, and the boat moves across the water without sound, leaving only a faint trail that disappears quickly. And as he rows, the distance between himself and the shore becomes smaller, slowly, steadily, without any sudden change. and the familiar shapes grow clearer. The line of sand, the low wooden huts, the quiet path that leads back toward his home, and everything feels calm and expected, as it always does at the end of the day. When the boat reaches the shallower water, the movement beneath it becomes softer and shorter, and he lets the oar rest, allowing the boat to drift gently until it touches the sand. And then he steps out carefully, feeling the cool water around his feet for a brief moment before it settles again, and he places both hands on the side of the boat and begins to pull it slowly onto the shore, feeling the weight of it against the sand, and the resistance is steady but familiar, and he does not rush. He moves at the same slow pace, step by step, until the boat rests in its usual place. He stands for a moment beside it, breathing in the evening air, which now feels cooler and slightly heavier, carrying the mixed scent of salt, damp wood, and the faint presence of the land. And then he begins to unload his tools and his catch, lifting the fish one by one, placing them into a basket. And each movement is simple and quiet, without any sharp motion. And he carries them toward the small hut nearby, where he begins to sort them again, separating them carefully. Larger fish to one side, smaller fish to another. And this sorting is done slowly, with the same attention he has given to every task throughout the day. And once the fish are arranged, he begins to clean them, using small, steady movements, rinsing them with water, placing them in order. And there is no rush in this work, only a calm repetition that continues from one fish to the next. When the fish are cleaned and set aside, he turns his attention to the net, lifting it again and spreading part of it out, running his fingers along the fibers to check for small tears or places where the threads have weakened. And if he finds something that needs to be fixed, he repairs it slowly, knot by knot, pulling the thread through and tightening it gently. And these small repairs take time, but they are done with patience, and they feel like part of the same steady rhythm that has carried him through the day. And once the net is in good order, he folds it carefully and places it where it will rest until the next morning. He then checks the rope, coiling it neatly, making sure it lies smooth and untangled, and he lifts the oar and sets it in place. And finally, he looks over the boat once more, wiping away small drops of water, making sure everything is as it should be. And when all is done, he steps back, and the scene around him feels very still. The boat resting on the shore, the water moving gently beyond it, and the light continuing to fade into evening. The village remains quiet as he begins to walk back along the path, following the same route he walked in the early morning. But now the ground is dim, the air is cooler, and the sounds are even softer. And his steps remain slow and steady, carrying him back toward his home. And his body feels the gentle weight of the day, not heavy or uncomfortable, just a quiet tiredness that settles into his arms and legs. And this tiredness feels natural, like something that belongs at the end of a day of simple work. When he reaches his home, he opens the door and steps inside, and the room greets him with the same stillness it held before dawn. And he sets down what he carries, placing everything in its place. And he moves slowly as he prepares a simple meal, perhaps a small portion of the fish he has cleaned, perhaps bread, and he eats quietly, sitting in the dim light, and the act of eating feels just as calm as the rest of his day, slow and steady, without interruption. After he is finished, he cleans what little needs to be cleaned, and then he sits for a while, doing nothing, simply resting, listening to the faint sound of the sea in the distance and the quiet of the room around him. And the day begins to settle into memory, not as separate moments, but as one continuous and gentle flow. The cool morning air, the slow walk to the shore, the steady movement of the boat, the quiet waiting on the water, the simple work of his hands, and the soft return in the evening. When he is ready, he prepares for sleep, removing his outer clothes and placing them aside, and he lies down on his bed, the blanket covering him in the same familiar way. And the room is dark now, and the sounds are even softer than before, and his breathing slows, and the calm of the day remains with him, not as something to think about, but as something that gently fades. And as he closes his eyes, the steady rhythm of the sea, the slow movement of the boat, and the quiet repetition of his work blend together into one soft and continuous feeling. And that feeling carries him slowly and gently into rest and into sleep, without any sudden change, without any interruption, just the same calm rhythm continuing into the night.